Welcome back to New Realities. I'm Alan Steinfeld, and this program is part of a series I'm doing about the upcoming weekend day on Sunday, January 23rd, with my guests, Geraldine Orozco and Marina Sarin, and who else is on that? Phil Gruber and Mariana Lee. So we have a lot of great people on that conference coming up, and it's more like, for me, that's more like a class, an ongoing understanding of the esoteric anatomies of species evolution. So I'm really happy Geraldine is here, because I find you, Geraldine, one of the awakened people on the path, and I've noticed a huge shift in you from when I first met you to this opening that's happening, I don't know, the last year or so. Can you talk about what's happened to you in the past year as far as this awakening of consciousness that I'm sensing? Maybe it's not true, but what's going on?
Well, it's been an incredible 6 years, because I keep thinking about the main moment when my major aha moments. It's been 10 years of major, incredible experiences. But within the past 5 years, I think that questioning those experiences has allowed a universe of understanding, and that has deepened over time. And I think that looking at the information that I received organically allowed me to kind of understand myself and the world around us. And so the idea is how to communicate that to others so that it's productive, that it's useful information. And that can sometimes be a bit complex when we need to look at things from so many different perspectives instead of just our own personal filter, so it's a lot of destruction of our own filter in order to be able to see beyond and to see how this information can benefit. And I think that part of the personal evolution as a teacher, or whatever someone wants to call about sharing information to another, is a responsibility of knowing what needs to be shared at a certain time that will be beneficial for the collective. So that's something that, I've been exploring myself as a spiritual being and as an individual.
I think it's great, because I see a glow around you. I see an expansion. I see, a presence. But what changed for you internally? Like, what was the process? Like, if you can describe it from an evolutionary up close standpoint. Yes.
One of the things that I experience in my life is first an awareness of what we do to ourselves as humans. So, for example, we sometimes opt to live in suffering or feeling of victimization. And sometimes when we understand what that's about, the fundamental thoughts that are creating that kind of ideas within us, you begin to understand patterns that are repetitive in your experiences. And these patterns. Are you
talking about you personally when you're saying you begin with someone?
Myself, like and everyone. Yeah.
You started to notice patterns of suffering so I was just curious, because I wasn't sure it was personal. Describe, we don't have to describe the particular suffering, but what happened then? What happened?
Oh, well, it's not so much about suffering, like something has to happen to you, but it's just a rather an exploration of yourself in your environment. Okay. And so, what is suffering? Suffering can be anything. It can be something smaller. It can be some major event. But for me, the questions were, the information that you're receiving can sometimes be so overwhelming that you're just not sure how to translate that, for the public, if it's even necessary, if it even benefits, or if it's something that's coming from the ego. So for the past 5 years, it's something that I was trying to explore to try to understand better, what is really the difference between an organism individually and collectively, and what is truly free will? That was my question. And that's something that I've been exploring personally, and something that at times can cause friction in your own internal beliefs and your own ideas as an identity, as a teacher, as what you're expressing here. So this is where my exploration has taken me, and it's taken some time. And I don't know the answers to everything. It's what I discovered essentially is that we are ever evolving and we are ever learning, and we're here to experience and explore multiple dimensional aspects of whatever we're learning. So there's never a finite one law to things. It's so many different perspectives that we have to experience, and that can be very difficult for the human to be able to transcend that, because we always want definition, we want personality, we want an identity. And so to break the idea of identity can be something very painful, for ourselves and others. So that destruction of identity is actually the thing that is the hardest as a human, I would say, personally. And I think in my general work, what I see with my clients. So this is what I'm learning through my personal experience, how to overcome and how to hold space for others to do as well.
I was just talking to Marina Sarin about this whole idea of free will, and she was saying that, is it free will if a being comes in and takes you against your will to a craft, and it may be for your own good, but is it really an invasion of a free will society? I mean, what's your opinion about that?
That's a really, really great question, one that I get asked a lot. And I guess my whole perspective, being an experiencer personally, having experienced that, I went really deep into trying to question, what my participation was in the co-creation of such an experience on another dimensional plane, which bled into my physical experience. I became conscious of it. And what I understand is, because I was in that highest vibrational state, I became aware of what I was experiencing. And when I began to review my life, I noticed several times in life little pockets of consciousness that I had awoken, and those two worlds merged and I became aware of them. So what does that mean? In reality, the fact that we are becoming aware, or we're heightening our frequency to some level where we're becoming aware of what's occurring, means that we could potentially be experiencing these things all the time without our awareness. It's just a matter of where our consciousness is focused at the time. And this is this actually plays a role into the law of free will, because if we see our everyday life, a lot of times in everyday life, we're mostly in hypnosis. We're not even aware of the things that are happening to us in everyday life. So in reality, we live most of our lives completely disconnected from where and what this human organism is and how it's exploring its environment. We are multidimensional beings, but what does that mean? In fact, we are like bubbles, spheres, which we're going to talk about more in depth in just a moment.
Yeah.
But this network creates this holographic projection that we are interacting with. Not only are we co-creating it, but we are interacting with it. And not only do we create it in our own space for our experience through our personal perception, but we are co-creating with other organisms, other humans that are participating in those holograms that we're experiencing. So in fact, we are actually these cells that are interconnected with one another. We are never separate in any circumstance from ourselves, from others, from those that we are experiencing interdimensionally. So the idea that we have...
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead. The idea that we have, go ahead, finish that, sorry.
Yeah, so there is something that we come across, which are certain, like we think that we are separate from one another, and therefore we make these separate agreements to experience things together. But in fact, these are agreements that are made before you come into the separation perspective of the three-dimensional plane. These are things that we are creating beyond this dimension, and it's part of the evolution of an organism, the movement. Each experience is movement in this collective evolution, this collective experience. So if you know that, to say that we are being imposed upon free will through those experiences, it doesn't quite work that way, because we are in an interconnected organism of co-creation. Therefore, the way that we choose to experience things transcend our ideas of what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, what is suffering, what is not suffering. And essentially, we have to remember we're looking at things through a human filter, and that's very limiting. especially when you're trying to define the activities that are happening with interdimensional consciousness, which is an aspect of yourself. You are interacting with an aspect of yourself, and that's very difficult for us as humans, which again want to have that personality, that identity, to be able to transcend that kind of relationship. It's something new for us that we need to learn as we're moving into a new time and space.
So you're saying on some level there's an agreement that happens when people have these multidimensional experiences. Even though there's resistance from the limited human perspective, they're not getting the bigger picture here of what's really going on, because in a way, most people do benefit from these multidimensional realities that we're tuned into. Although I think people should have a choice to say, no, wait a minute, I may have made that agreement, but I'm choosing right now to stay with my limited human perspective, my shut down human perspective, right?
Well,
don't you think that? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, that we want to stay with our limited human perspective. But you know what happens is that it's not about choice. What is choice? We think that choice is like, oh, I don't want to experience this today, therefore I shouldn't experience it. But the choice that we make in being an interconnected organism as one is actually quite limited, okay, if you look at it from the highest perspective, because each organism is designed specifically to play a role in a whole. If you put let me see, how should I put it? If you put little balls inside of a jello, every single movement that the ball makes will affect the entire jello plate. So to say that I am experiencing something I don't want to experience, in fact, this movement is a result of the movement of the other ball over there. It's the movement of the other ball. Everything is interconnected, and the movement of the collective in that jello plate is being affected by the human carrying the jello plate, if you can imagine. So on and on and on. We are interconnected, and we are participating in a very beautiful organic movement of evolution in the three-dimensional plane, in which contrast is the movement, the contrast that causes that movement, that is the experience. We can only experience through contrast. That's what we're here in the three-dimensional plane to experience. So to resist that is futile. And as we become aware that we are active on more than this dimensional plane, we have to be willing to surrender to the identity and to the limitations of the three-dimensional plane of cause and effect, to understand that we are actually creating beyond that, in that there's a consciousness, a super consciousness, the DNA that holds all of these organisms together, is functioning in the same way the DNA in your body is creating together. This little tiny cell might be hijacked by a virus, but what's the participation of the cell, right? There was a low immunity, there was all these things that played a role in creating an environment for that experience. Again, so there's many steps to these experiences that have to be understood. And the responsibility of the human is to understand how it helps to create them. When we're talking about being helpless, ultimately there is no helplessness unless you profoundly believe that you are helpless and incapable of choosing in that moment, in that experience. So these experiential contracts, in reality, they're experiences to experience, they're agreements to experience that we create with our own self. So we wanted that contact. We wanted to see what's in the other dimensional plane. So we see what's happening. We see it through a filter of, let's say, hybridization. What is the hybridization? They take your genetic information, they take a child. The child is a combination of genetic cocktail of information, and then it exists and it carries out some agenda. From the bigger picture, what is that? That is the sustaining of this matrix in the three-dimensional plane. It's sustaining the life forms and continuing the generation of this evolution. Because our minds, we want to categorize things as good or bad, but we cannot, because these are things that are occurring and abiding by laws that go beyond our understanding. And until we master this physical body, we don't have any power over this. If we have
Right.
power over this physical body, we can begin to affect other dimensions. And that's what we're here to do today, is to teach and train how to do that.
Yeah, no, I see your point about that, because we are very limited, and our personality is our identity that makes us want to keep the individual essence intact. I just think if that personality chooses that is something that they have the free will to do, to stay limited or expanded, and then, but in your case, I would say, sort of sacrifice your personality. You let go of the old belief systems. And it seems like actually physiologically something has changed. You're more at peace with the greater identity, the greater being, and your cellular structure has accessed more light because of that. Would you say that's true?
Yes, I think you can say that's true. But I will say that I don't see it as a sacrifice. In fact, I think it's a sacrifice to stay stuck in personality and identity, because you're limiting. What happens, and what I've experienced, is that when you stay stuck in personality and identity, our organism becomes sick, because we're not moving. Chi, the life force needs to be constantly moving. We are a vortex of life force, and that vortex of life force needs to be moving. The faster it moves, you're at a higher vibrational frequency. Everything is working in harmony. The slower it moves, and sometimes even moving in an opposite direction, this is illness and essentially death. So if you notice that, what free will really means is that we're constantly choosing between the collective whole or what's counter creative. We're either creating or we're counter creating. That's what free will is. So when we look at these topics like, okay, ET contact, feeling helpless, we need to really take a look at what that means. Is how do you know if your participation or whatever it is that you're interacting in this experience hologram that you created is something positive or negative? You really don't know. If you sit with yourself and look at that, it takes levels of understanding. You have to understand yourself, you have to understand the other. And how many people are going to be able to understand this other? Because there is no other. It is you. That is you that you're experiencing. You're interacting with yourself in these experiences. And that's something it's very hard for us to understand sometimes.
Well, I do like your perspective, because I know when I acknowledge that I was part of something bigger, everything energetically opened up for me. My mind expanded, and I started to get greater insights, be more abundant, more productive, more. So I know what you're saying. It'd be interesting for you to have a conversation with Marina, just to see where those perspectives kind of line up. But let's talk about your work now, and going deeper into understanding the bloodlines. I think there's something interdimensional about the body and the blood. And, when we genetically share DNA with other races in order to produce more another species and a hybrid species, I think they're getting more than just the physical DNA. I think there's other levels of the multidimensional matrix mixed in with the body that we're not even aware of, but it is related to a higher physical essence. Does that make sense?
What is connected to a higher physical essence?
Well, the physical body, the bloodlines, the genetics, the DNA, it's not just physical, I'm saying. It is paraphysical, it's multidimensional. We're just seeing the body. Oh yeah, that's your physical body, but there's a depth of multidimensionality to the physical body. That's part of the bigger matrix. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, and so, yeah, there's so many things that I would love to address just on what you were just speaking, which are so important for us to understand, what we are, what is our genetics, what are our ancestors, what are they? This multidimensional body, when we come into the body, we are attaching to a network of information, which is the ancestral lineage. We come in and we choose, in a sense, and I'd be careful with the word choose, because it's actually a union of frequency. It's frequency that is being matched, and it's being matched organically in the universe. And this is part of this morphogenetic field that we're talking about. It's a self-organizing intelligence. You are participating in that self-organizing intelligence as a cell that is embodying into this physical body. And as this physical body is experiencing the hologram, which we call a matrix, things are occurring within the filters of the laws of what exists in this limited experience. But we are simultaneously, from that essence core, from source, which is the source of all things. And again, this is not some allocated, defined location. This is the entire organism as one, expressed as these many different cells experiencing something. Every single human has infinite aspects of themselves that are experiencing different realities in its own different dimensional expressions. The human body in this timeline is 13-dimensional bodies, 13-dimensional planes that it is constantly moving in and out of. And so our access to our genetic code becomes alive when we embody the physical body and come into this, what we know as the earth, which is basically another organism. It's another cell that we're participating as a part of. And this cell has its own memory structure, its own genetic code, its own DNA. DNA is what we need to understand what DNA is. DNA is a holographic storage system. It's a recording system, and it's a projecting system that allows information to be informed to the source. It is basically the language of this infinite consciousness made into a small genetic structure, into a physical translation that we can read, that can be written, and that can be rewritten and deprogrammed. Okay, it is in vivo. It's constantly living right now in this moment. It can't be edited. So we know that through epigenetics. We know that our environment plays a role in what we're experiencing in the physical body. And we know that we can affect what our body does. When we talk about the morphogenetic field, for example, we're literally talking about the intelligence of this network that has the ability, without genetic editing, to be able to construct parts of its body that is necessary in order to sustain its balance of an organism. Can you imagine that? And this is scientifically proven.
Can you describe what you mean by morphogenetic field? Because I want to get your definition, because I have my own and maybe other people do. So describe what that means.
So the morphogenetic field, from what I understand, what I've seen and work in, is a field of self-organizing intelligence that we are a part of, and our human body has this morphogenetic field, but it's interconnected to the morphogenetic field of the collective. So just like the picture of the jello, the balls in the jello, the field is this field of intelligence that knows what this organism needs collectively. So the more we're aware of the function and the architecture of this morphogenetic field, we have the ability to affect the physical hologram, as well as other aspects of ourselves on whatever other dimensions we're experiencing. And so therefore, we can access healing for the body. We can have these interdimensional experiences. We can connect to fragments of ourselves. Again, we need to remember that unity consciousness in these conversations is incredibly important, because this is what it is. This is the scientific proof that we are a connected field, that there is no separation, and that healing, essentially, or evolution, is actually designed in a very beautiful, elegant manner for the benefit of the collective. And so where does free will play a role in that is that we're choosing between what is good for the collective as opposed to what is good for this little organism, the ego here right now. And so that's where the difference lies. One is creative and one is counter-creative. So, when we talk about ET aspects, our ancestors, we are tuning in to our DNA, and this is what we do in healing. We begin to access your genetic code, your information, your field in which you are holding on to patterns of information that you're expressing. And some of these expressions cause suffering. They cause blockages, they cause a limitation to how your organism is being expressed.
Well, give me an example of that. What would cause suffering?
For example, feelings of unworthiness, feelings of insecurity.
Okay. And this is stuff you've worked through yourself, to patterns of thought form realities that actually aren't even yours, but you've inherited or someone put them on you. So as you look at these limited beliefs, right, how do you free yourself from that then?
Yeah, so for example, let's say somebody's feeling very insecure about themselves. So they begin to carry out their lives feeling insecure. They limit themselves from experiences. They hide. They don't get into relationships. They are unable to succeed in their business. And they live a life of fear and limitation. Let's say that. But when you look back in the ancestors, this is actually something that the mother did and the father did. And they played the same role, the same program in different ways. Then
so how do you turn it around? What's the mechanism?
Right. So first, when you identify that program, you begin to understand what are the belief systems that went into that. And you look at the emotional beliefs, the traumas that caused those limiting beliefs. Traumas, let's say a mother, a great grandmother that said, because she was afraid of judgment, she said, you can't ever reach your dreams. So you're going to be in the kitchen from this moment on. Right. So she tells the daughter. So the daughter plays that role out, and she lives a life of suffering because she believes that to be true. Right. And so again, this is a perfect example of how our perceptions are really strongly created. We strongly believe that this is true. And so we build an entire life around that, and experiences, not just in the physical. We are affecting all other fragments of ourselves with those same belief systems. And also how we experience and filter them. So how you turn that around is by questioning, is that program true? And you begin to look at the different sides of that. And as you begin to, and this is what expansion is,
but
right? This is what
you ask someone, though, if that program was true and they were feeling unworthy, they would probably say it was true because that's what they're feeling. So how do you get underneath the conscious mind to access the true divine being?
Yeah, it's more than just, is it true? It's is it true for you? Like, is it true that you are unworthy, right? Mm-hmm. And the answer is no, it's not true that I'm unworthy.
Not true, but people may think it's true, right? They may believe
it's a thought. It's a thought,
yes,
but thoughts aren't always true. And so that's where we need to discern the difference between what is true, and defining truth is a lifelong process, essentially, because we are here in contrast, in order to feel contrast, in order to explore many perspectives. That's part of the human experience. So those of you that say, oh, why am I not enlightened yet? This is lifelong. It's a lifelong journey to understand what it means to unconditionally, not judgmentally love and accept this physicality, this experience, and everything that comes with it, including contact, right, because that anything that we are in resistance to is stagnation of life force. And sometimes the surrender actually leads to expansion, right? So that's something that
I think in your case it actually has. But let's say there's a block or something that you don't even know you have. Some kind of resistance to something that you think is just you. How does it appear in your consciousness that this is maybe in the way of an evolutionary moment? How do you discover that for the people you're working with?
Yeah, so a block can be, again, it's the same thing. It's a thought form. It's a thought form that limits your ability to see beyond your current belief system and programs. That's essentially what it is. So wherever you are currently attaching to a definition or a perspective about yourself, it will limit your ability to go beyond that. So, that's how we work. We just tackle those. And when you begin to access that data, you're entering into a holographic field of information, because you're not only accessing your information, you're accessing information from your entire ancestral lineage, which are fragments of yourself. You have incarnated as them, you have experienced them, it's interconnected network of experiences. And sometimes this is where we also see ET contact, right? Coming down the lineage, the ancestor went down the mother's line. In reality, every single human on this planet has experienced contact on some level, because we are constantly interacting with these interdimensional aspects of ourselves. So we need to learn how to transcend and accept this physical body completely on the physical level and on all these other dimensional planes. This is what it means to integrate. When we access those moments of trauma, literally in a moment of trauma, there's fragmentation that occurs in the body. And that fragmentation is suspended in that timeline. It literally creates a point of energy. And we end up going back to that point of energy as a reference point, and that's what a blockage is. A blockage is a point of reference of energy that has been stagnated. So in order to reintegrate, we need to revisit these fragments of ourselves and expand the perspective of that fragment, release the flow of life force in this aspect of ourselves, and therefore reintegrate within the body. And that's how the body, not only does it become aware, but it's learning through all these experiences how to become whole, how to reach the point of non-judgment, to that 0 point of unconditional love. That's what healing essentially is.
Well, you bring up a really good point, because there's probably a human morphogenetic field limitation on meeting the other beings collectively because of the fear and the trauma that's embedded in the collective. So this is why we haven't had full-on contact, because the human morphogenetic field is in resistance to first letting go of its identity, its limited beliefs, its religion, its politics, its media, all that has defined them, and welcoming something beyond those limited forms. So it's in the collective field of humanity to resist contact, in a sense. That's just what I'm saying. Do you think so?
Not so much. And,
all right. No, it's
why.
good to disagree.
Yeah.
You don't have to agree. This is a discussion. So you see a different point of view. Well, I'm interested in your point of view. So yes, tell me.
Yes. Well, let me tell you what I have seen and experienced is that all of these programs that we think are the government or all of these, let's see what we see as reality. We see the entertainment industry, the government, all these systems in our world that have created false realities for us to believe. However, the organism that becomes aware that there's more than the illusion that's being presented to us easily has contact and is aware of the contact. Contact, again, you are meeting fragments of yourself on other dimensional planes. It's the same thing with paranormal activity. Okay, you are your environment. You are your experience. It's you. Everything begins and ends with yourself. So that being said, as a collective, how does that work? As a collective, even though contact per se, it's a very personal thing, because not everyone is coming into this collective soup in order to experience interdimensionality. Not everyone is, let's say, prepared or ready for that. What is contact? Contact is a vibrational frequency. Contact is the willingness and the access to your dimensionality. And not everyone is willing to do that. So, however,
right, there's a big resistance on the human level for some of that. Yes, not everyone's willing to do that. So yes, sorry, what were you going to say then after that?
Yeah, so they're not willing to do that, but it's not because they're not willing, it's because they're unaware. They're unaware. They haven't experienced, they're not a product of the availability of awareness in order to access those aspects of themselves. So as a collective organism, we are evolving, however. And as they say, the veil is thinning. More and more of these organisms are experiencing their interdimensionality because we're entering that specific space-time in the universe of our evolutionary state in order to do so. The whole concept of going into fifth dimensional plane, I don't really agree to that, because we're in and out of all dimensional planes all the time. We're constantly evolving, and depending on our internal work, we have access to dimensional planes that we access ourselves. So I don't believe the narrative that we are limited by the illusion. In fact, we limit ourselves by our own beliefs in that illusion. So that's a personal choice completely. And it also has to do with your own personal inner work. If you're going to do the inner work, it's necessary in order to heighten your vibrational frequency, in order to have this kind of contact with interdimensionality.
I agree. We limit ourselves, and it's up to us to increase our vibratory field. And we're at a nexus point where we have a choice. And I think this is what's been dividing humanity, maybe even for 2 years or longer, but it's so obvious now that there's resistance to change and there's pushing towards evolution. So how do you feel we get through this impasse of human versus human to connect to the ET, or not even ET, because they're not really ETs, it's just the cosmic mind that's waiting for us. So it's that same question of going over the resistance collectively, right? And they're not aware. Of course, people aren't aware because they don't, some of them don't want to be aware because they're enjoying isolation, or not even enjoying, they might be suffering, but they think that's all there is to know. So I guess your work is about education, isn't it? And educating people to possibilities.
Yes, well, I certainly hope so. The education of trying to understand what we are as multidimensional, how to navigate our multidimensionality, and essentially how to choose. Because otherwise, if we're not aware, most people don't even know that they have the ability to choose. And I think we're coming in a moment, as you said, in which we're becoming aware. I think what's happened over the past couple of years has shooken up that little safety net that we had, in order for us to begin to train ourselves to feel comfortable in the unknown. What that resistance is a fear of the unknown. And we are battling that with ourselves, all of us as a collective, internally, with our own shadows, and collectively with the things that we feel are separate from us. And we are not separate at all. So in fact, it's not that we are separate or fighting with humans, it's that we're fighting with ourselves, essentially. And we need to move towards unity, because unity is seeing yourselves, the other, as yourself. There is no more differentiation between that anymore. We need to see ourselves as a whole, as a unity. And I think that will help us bridge and merge any of those little ideas that we're separate from anything, because I think that is the healthiest, and what will help each organism feel safety in that unknown is the ability to surrender and explore whatever it is that may come about, those experiences, all experiences.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that aspect. And I'm also interested because as you've worked through these issues and traumas and looked at your own limitations and you've let them go, talk about the vibratory increase within your body, the awakening of the life force and the Kundalini as you have progressed on this path, because it's obvious to me that there is that awakening of the higher levels of energetics in the embodiment and beyond.
Yes. So how are we opening up these systems?
And what happens in the body when you do open those systems is something I'm very interested in.
Excellent. So what's happening is, we were talking a little bit about believing the illusion that is being presented to us. And what happens is that when we are not aware of our ability to create and our own field and what we're projecting, we are at the mercy, in a sense, of what is being shown to us or what is being done to us. We believe that we are at the mercy of that. And therefore, we become puppets, and we are in hypnosis constantly. And the fact that we are in hypnosis, we are somehow giving our ability to choose through these experiences of life. And what that does is the first three chakras are primarily projecting this concept that you are a victim or that you are disconnected from a whole. You are living through those experiences through the root of fear, whether you feel safe in this house, in this body, of relationships and exchanges. We feel that we have been a product of parasitic exchange, or that we are being fed off of and taken advantage of. And in the solar plexus, your empowerment, you don't see yourself as someone that has power. You see yourself as a victim of experiences. So this belief system is very heavily ingrained in our society. It's indoctrinated. It is in the genetic code of experience, of suffering, of the lower aspect of the human experience. When we begin to become aware that we can choose different, we begin to replace those programs with more expansive programs, where we begin to educate ourselves that the vision doesn't have to be manipulated from the lower, but we can begin to work with the heart, the throat, and the third eye. And this is where you begin to enter into the collective field, to the morphogenetic field. It begins to attach here in the heart center, the throat, and the third eye. This is where we begin to have the ability to navigate that field. We do so by activating these higher levels. And what is that? The heart, the throat, and the third eye is your connection to the whole. The heart is the largest electromagnetic field in your body, which is the one that affects and directs your experience directly. So if your belief is that you're unworthy, literally you are counter-creating. You are just not creating. The throat is communication, expression. Can you communicate? Can you express? Can you ask for your needs to be met? Your third eye, your intuition. It is incredibly important to develop the intuitive mind, because the intuition is actually the key to navigation in the three-dimensional plane. You will not be able to navigate the three-dimensional plane without your intuition. And in order to have intuition, you need to have a balance between the two life forces that come together to create within the three-dimensional plane, your feminine and your masculine aspect. So as we rebalance those perspectives, because those perspectives are heavily inverted through society and programs and many other systems, we begin to understand what we are. We are a creative projection of life force. And we go from an inversion of energy moving in the body to begin to remove those blockages in the chakra system. Those are thought forms. Blockages are thought forms. They're programs. When you remove those programs, you begin to move life force through the body. Thought forms are vibrational frequency. So if thought forms are fear, you're not moving fast. You're moving really slow, stagnant, and heavy. If your thought form is compassion, you're moving very fast. This is a higher vibrational frequency, and your body is made up of those. So as you begin to dissolve those heavier frequencies, you begin to move your vortex faster. Your health can come into place, your ability to manifest into the physical, what you need, what you wish to desire, what you wish to experience. And you begin to connect to the higher aspects of yourself and work on those aspects in which you are becoming aware that this same system is working for all dimensional layers. So for example, in the 8th dimensional plane in dream time, let's say you have a lot of nightmares. If you're having a lot of difficult life, you're projecting that into your dream time, and it's a filter that you're seeing things through. So you have to be able to become aware in all of those dimensional planes. Lucid dreaming, you become awake from the hypnosis of sleep into creation. You now can navigate planes. 9th dimension, 10th dimension, you begin to access interdimensional beings. ET consciousness, all these things, your hybridization programs, you begin to awaken to your participation that you've had all along without your awareness. And so now the human begins to see itself as more than just a human puppet of a system. It is now a God creator, and it begins to create on more dimensions. And essentially, when one human does that, it affects the collective. So all humans right now are beginning to come aware of that, because not only is this world galaxy moving through this time in which the vibrational frequency is higher collectively, but we are also affecting that within ourselves. So the more that we wake up and empower ourselves and heal, we are doing so for the collective and for our ancestry. This is how we reach this unity point.
So these are things you've been through personally. I mean, I know you're talking from experience. So as you cleared the lower chakras there and you release that energy, I'm just curious, you don't mind sharing personally, what was the sensation you felt in your body? What was the physicality of it personally that you experienced?
Well, the physicality through that work is a complete peace and serenity. It is the most freeing experience to be able to reintegrate from your fragments. And of course, I spent many years looking at every single memory in my entire life in which fragmentation occurred and reintegrated from that. And the moment that you reintegrate, it's like pieces of your body are literally feeling like they're waking up. It's like they're coming back, and your perspective begins to broaden. You are able to hold more compassion. You're able to be more loving unconditionally, and you begin to dissolve this judgment of yourself and things outside of you. And it is the most rewarding, the most freeing thing to experience, because you're fluid in mind, you're fluid in body. Energy is moving through the body becomes relaxed, it becomes calm and centered, and you have the vision that you immediately connect to a network that allows you to reach higher levels of information and data of the things that you're experiencing. So you become psychic is eventually what happens. You're activating your psychic abilities. And you can heal yourself and others. You begin to experience things that are magic, what we call magic. You experience these communication with the universe, because you realize you are the universe and you are communicating and interacting with it all the time. So it is it's a very, you can say, empowering, but not from an egoic perspective. It's an empowering, complete surrender and balance of your aspects of yourself. And there is a very careful responsibility that is now bestowed upon you in order to be responsible of this kind of navigation and compassion for yourself and others. So it's a beautiful process.
Yeah. Do you feel that Kundalini opening up your spine, going out your head to connect to those higher chakras? Is that something you experienced in that field?
In a way, yes. But I feel like I experienced Kundalini at the very beginning of my process, but it didn't have as much effect as the integration of my fragments did, because I feel that was step one, like, let's say Kundalini, or the opening of your spaces. All of your chakras have to open, all of them. Okay. But, and your chakras are not just double-sided vortices. It's the sphere. It's your entire body. There are layers of your body. It's actually spherical, and it's your entire body. So, as you begin to work with all of them have to be cleared and opened and accessed and learned how to manage, So yes.
No, it's beautiful. Thanks. I mean, I'm interested in people's process, so thank you for sharing that. So if the ETs are out there, but in a way they're they're part of our greater mind, do they serve a purpose for our evolution? I mean, the whole idea is to return to source anyway, right? The whole idea is to go back to the oneness. And do ETs offer us a more enhanced human experience, would you say? Or are they, wouldn't want to say distraction, but the whole focus is the development of the divine self. So are they part of this step towards source consciousness, or can we bypass that in a sense, like maybe some of the Eastern religions, the Buddha, the Christos, all that, and maybe they've had that contact, but I'm just curious your point of view, where they fit in our human evolutionary development of our morphogenetic fields.
Absolutely. Well, what these ETs, I call them interdimensional, but ETs or interdimensional beings. Again, what we are experiencing is ourselves in what we can, as through the human perspective, let's say a future part of us or a past part of us. It is us in another dimensional plane. And so these beings are also evolving. They're not separate, they are us. And so every single layer of consciousness, they are a fragment of consciousness. We have infinite fragments, and those fragments and ourselves are a fragment of source. And so these beings, ET, this manifestation of consciousness, is also experiencing evolution on their own level. So whatever they're choosing to do through the laws of that particular dimension in which they participate in, they are evolving. And every single organism plays a distinct and beautiful and perfect role in this evolutionary process. So the hybridization program, for example, it's the sustainability of this hologram that we have co-created. Do I think that's productive or counterproductive? There was a moment where I thought it was counterproductive when you look at it from the level, because some of these hybrids are being created for destructive purposes. Some of these hybrids are being created for wonderful purposes, the evolution. They say high vibration combinations of genetic information. But essentially, we need to understand that in this three-dimensional experience, contrast is the name of the game. It is that dualistic aspect. It's just one layer of infinite dimensional expressions of possibility. So that being said, you cannot say this dimension is wrong. It shouldn't exist. It is one level of experience that we as infinite consciousness are here to explore. So it is a divine balance. And the understanding that we have free will, when you look at it from that perspective, changes, because you realize that your free will, you don't really have free will in the perspective that you're choosing, like, oh, today I want to experience this, today I don't want to experience this. No, you are participating in an intelligent, in a collective intelligence. And that collective intelligence is self-organizing, it's self-healing in order to access its wholeness. And we do the same thing in our body. We don't need to tell the cell over here to send blood cells in order to heal the cancer in the body. That happens. If we allow it, if we surrender and we allow that to happen. That same dynamic and function that functions in the body is occurring in the greater organism. You can say the ETs are red and white blood cells, they're doing things, but everything has, it is an organism, it's an intelligence that is self-organized.
So if we come from that collective oneness, right, and we're here evolving towards it, what was really the purpose of incarnation? That's a question I ask a lot of people. What is, yes, tell me your perspective.
Yeah, I love that question. It's so important because this is one that, took a long time to kind of understand, what is the purpose of this experience. And ultimately, when you begin to understand that every single organism has a role that is designed as part of its collective, it's you can say it's a blueprint of its existence. We're playing a role in source becoming aware of itself through infinite possibilities. And it's just experience. It's the learning of an organism. It's that's what evolution is. Evolution has to keep moving. It's learning, it's experiencing things. And so it depends on us how we are experiencing our life what we do with it, right? We can spend an entire life suffering, counter-creating, being a victim, and then that's it, right? Those are whatever has to happen as a result happens. Or you can live a life of creation, manifestation, and contributing to this evolution in that way. There is no right or wrong. It's that part is completely your choice.
Right, but
Okay,
what's the purpose of it? Okay, we come back, we're here, we're in separation, we're limited, we work through our illusions and blocks, return to the oneness. So, but what was the actual reason for the incarnation if it's coming from oneness and returning to oneness? You know what I mean? What is the bigger plan of creation for that purpose?
It's learning. It's experience. Experience is learning. The source is learning through each incarnation. The source is learning through each fragment, experiencing whatever it's experiencing.
So incarnate, the existence is evolving through our individual experiences. It's what my teacher would call making known the unknown.
Yes, we're experiencing all those unknowns, and we do so in such a massive way, because in order to evolve, in order for something to move, it can't stay still, so movement is experience, essentially. So this fragment that comes from source is experiencing in order to see different perspectives, explore. And the incredible thing about the human organism is that we have to remember we're not just this. We are everything. We are so many fragments of ourselves experiencing things simultaneously, and we have access to that if we want to. And more importantly, when we integrate them, we can bring them into the now in order to expand and really, really have a life that is, expansive and creative and healthy for us here. That's a beautiful thing. And through that, source is becoming aware of itself. It becomes aware of itself through all of these. It
becomes aware of itself through limitation as well. So we have the experience of limitation, right? So as we work through that, the greater knowledge comes back into the collective and just increases the whole vibration of the field in a sense. So
exactly, yes.
No, I'm just curious. So where do you think we're going at this stage of our evolution? What is because I feel like, I think you said we're going from third to fifth, but we're already here. But, so what's the specifics of this movement that we're in now? Because obviously we're going somewhere. And what does it look like for you? And what does it look like in the next year or 2 or 5 or 10 years to the consciousness evolution of humanity?
Well, I think, the beauty of this Earth life is that you get to choose if you want to create or not create. And I think that understanding what creation is understanding that your choice affects the collective. So that's what awakening means, when you wake up and you become aware of the role that you play in the participation of this evolution. That's usually where the organism comes into a state of healthiness, of vitality, of balance, and essentially maintaining the organism in the healthiest point is the best for the collective, because you're a healthy cell as a part of an organism. You're contributing to this well-being, to this expansion in a sense. So what I see, though, for the next couple of years, what's happening on Earth in this hologram, is still very much a real thing for us. And we have to learn how to navigate that, because it's a part of this experience. And we have collectively co-created that. And we collectively co-created this movement in which this current timeline, this Earth, this world is moving towards a split between artificial and what is the organic intelligence, right? What is organic? And so this is a very interesting thing. What is counter-creative is artificial because it's controlled and it's limited. And what is creative is the organic because it's infinite. So the more we move away from artificial everything, And we come into the center of what's organic, learning how to master our energetic field, learning how to eat, grow our food, how to master life force. We no longer become limited by the illusion of the physical world. And this is important for us because as we evolve, this is kind of like this little moment of transformation that is occurring for this world. A key moment where many of us need to become aware of that ability in order to contribute to the wellness of the earth. Because if we don't, we're going more into control systems, heavier control systems. We're looking at systems like China, for example, which is already being implemented in many different countries, and it's been doing so without our conscious awareness for many years now. Especially here in the Silicon Valley, the technology is becoming more artificial, and we are feeding through our activities an intelligence, an artificial intelligence, which eventually will begin to run our lives, essentially, if we don't choose not to participate in that. So it's important to inform ourselves on what's happening behind the scenes in this world in order to learn to discern. And the only way we can do that is by accessing that field, that intuitive field, the morphogenetic field, this collective intelligence that knows how to navigate data, how to navigate information and experiences. We do that through our body. Our body, our hologram is connected to this genetic code of the earth, which is recording all experiences through history, which, some people can call the Akashic records. We tune into that information. We have access to that. So where we're headed, if we tune into that, we can easily see the things that are happening in the next couple of years. And in the next couple of years, the systems are strengthening in that they want to implement these control systems more, because first you hypnotize the human race, you take away their belief that they have the ability to heal and to empower, and then you control and keep them into little rat races for survival. And so that is an illusion that we need to break, and we need to break that with our contribution, with our everyday actions. So that requires...
I think maybe because... I'm just sorry, I'm interrupting, but I think maybe because it's becoming so obvious of those thought form control systems are obviously in place. Before it was just like maybe not, but now everyone can see it, that it might give us the power to break that. Would you say that's why we've created those obvious systems in the first place?
Absolutely. And again, it's part of this experiencing contrast, right? So the quicker we understand that, we will relieve ourselves from any kind of unnecessary emotions that block our clear action, because it's like there is no time, but at the same time, time is speeding up. Our intention is affecting reality quicker than other timelines. And that's because of the moment that we are in this collective universe. We are literally moving through a faster frequency rate of the universe. Things are manifesting, and that can work to our power, to our benefit, if we understand how to implement those abilities. So right now, if the collective is in fear, and we're feeding into this hazy hypnosis of fear, we're contributing to a different end result in the next 3-4 years. If we're not embodying fear and we're staying in a state of balance, we're changing the timeline that we're going to experience collectively. So this is how we affect the whole, and talking about the morphogenetic field, it's just like how networks of ants work, networks of animals, bees, there is an intelligence in which it doesn't even have to be spoken, but we are receiving collective information. And I see this every single day in my healing sessions. Through the years, I can map out the different frequencies that we're passing through, because there's themes to the healing every month, right? We're passing through certain frequencies of information. As a collective, we're healing things collectively. Sometimes we're healing the feminine wounds, sometimes we're healing masculine wounds. And we are moving, it's like we're weaving through, we move through these different aspects of this dualistic expression on different levels. So the idea is to come back to that wholeness and to see it as a whole. That is usually the most healing thing. So that's what I hope for us.
Beautiful. I know you have to go soon. I just have one more question. You have to go. How soon do you have to go? I mean,
I have
like,
some time. Yeah, I have a little bit of time.
oh, okay,
No
good.
problem.
Because I just wanted to see what's your vision when the whole world wakes up to that true potential, that divine power, that ultimate source of creativity. What does it look like to you? What's that? Okay, let's say we're there and we're getting there. What is that process and where do we go from there? First, tell me what the vision of the planet looks like, and then what's the ongoing process of that evolution as you see it. I'm just curious.
I mean, what I see, first of all, in this three-dimensional plane, we have to remember that duality is a name of the game here in this manifestation that we're living in, okay, this timeline. So that being said, in this timeline as we know it, we're not going to necessarily experience every single organism on the planet waking up in that sense, in its whole totality. They will change frequency, and some will decide not to. It's part of their experience. But what happens is that we are moving through veils of dimensional planes, and depending on the dimensional veil that we're entering, organisms that are not in alignment with that dimensional frequency basically dissolve. Okay, they will, in other words, they perish. They leave the physical body because the physical body is no longer in alignment with that vibrational timeline. So that's important to remember because it's part of this evolutionary process. Okay, and so those beings that are currently working in changing their frequency and waking up and doing all that thing, you're going to be experiencing this in a very different way. So it's like you're creating your own reality, essentially. And collectively, we're creating our own reality. Those that are in resonance are uniting. They're uniting, they're becoming connected. Those that are not in resonance are also becoming connected on some level. And they're going to experience things collectively in their own nucleus and system of vibrational frequency. So unity is the merging of those two. But in this three-dimensional plane, we're here to experience that duality. We're here to experience that. And when we as an individual soul are done experiencing this three-dimensional plane, we will transcend into another dimension as necessary. And we can play in those we can experience those dimensional planes.
And that's the beautiful part of that we're moving towards that awakening of humanity. And what does that look like, the higher dimensional planes to exist on as a collective society? What do you see?
Well, as a collective, I don't necessarily see that it's collective, but it's also individual. Remember, because Ascension is very much as an organism. What you're going to experience from the experience part, it's personal because you're seeing it through this thing. But as a collective, as you begin to unite with the other organisms, it becomes more expansive, it becomes more creative, more compassionate to one another. There is more of these activities like intuition being active and telepathic communication. And essentially, all of the things that we see are ET counterparts or interdimensional beings. This is what we become. We become these beings that are no longer navigating the three-dimensional plane. So we are essentially moving through archetypes of vibrational frequency. So all of these different beings, these species in the universe, species are vibrational frequencies, essentially. Not so much species from like, this is a draconian, this is a Pleiadian. It's just an organization of vibrational frequency. It doesn't matter what they look like.
Right, I get that.
And so we're doing the same thing. We're evolving through our own spectrum of vibrational frequency. We have archetypes here on the earth. And once you finish experiencing all those archetypes, you go on to the next level of experience of consciousness, and then on and on and on. You begin to become aware, and we can move through those as fast as we want in this lifetime. But to benefit and get the full experience of the physical life, first you need to master this one. You need to become aware of your archetypes and where you're in your evolution. So I think that plays a big important role in what we're going to look at potentially in the future.
Right. And to love it all each step of the way, to embrace each each of those limited beliefs and then work through them, but to embrace it, to own it, to love it in a sense, the entire experience, right, of the incarnation and its lineages and its limitations and the unknown. To actually love the unknown is what's moved through us. And so I know you're going to be talking a lot more about that this Sunday. I wanted to show people that flyer for what is coming up here. This is, do you see that on your screen there?
Oh, yes. Wonderful. Mm-hmm.
Okay. This is a special free webinar brought to you by Mariana Leah, who's part of our greater family here. This is Morphogenesis and the Return of Our Divine Blueprint. That's Sunday, January 23rd, this Sunday, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific, right here on New Realities. We're going to be broadcasting this, streaming this live. And we have some amazing presenters, including Geraldine Orozco. I'll be presenting on the cellular functions of morphogenesis, part of Bruce Lipton's ideas, part of post-Darwinian, Lamarckian ideas, and then taking that to a level of what that means as the morphogenetic field is shifting, as in like an example I gave the other day of 144,000 is the conscious level, but just the 100th monkey theory, if you know what that is. So we also have Phil Gruber, my good friend. Do you know Phil, Geraldine?
Not too much. I'm really excited to get to know him. Yeah. Yes,
he's a very funny, interesting, creative person. And of course, Marina Seren, who's been a frequent guest on this show. We also have Neil Gore is going to be doing something. So this, in a sense, is a learning of meta biology as well as core biology. So just tell us what you'll be talking about specifically that day on Sunday.
Yes, I'll be talking about the morphogenetic field. I'm going to be taking a look at holographic DNA and how we are participating in and interacting the morphogenetic field. So I'll be breaking it down and talking about how it functions and how we participate in that.
Holographic DNA, can you just give us that sounds really interesting. Can you just give us a little brief taste of what that means and how you work with it?
Yeah, so basically essentially a holographic DNA, the projection that makes is essentially the morphogenetic field. Within that is the instructions of creation of the physical body. And more than that, it's the instructions of what this human will experience in more than one dimensional plane. So we'll be taking a look at how it affects how we can access and learn to work with that information, because that's what we're doing. That's what I do in DNA reprogramming. We are reprogramming and activating the higher body.
Well, that's exciting, because I think that's the evolution of humanity. I think people are waking up to the fact that that's what we need to do, that you're right.
Yeah.
Thought forms are put on us unconsciously or consciously, and as we move through it, the energetic patterns shift and we gather more life force, more energy. So do you think these last 2 years was about that understanding with the lockdown and all that, about how we can do that individually, or was that more an imprisonment of the thought forms into our genetics?
Oh, no, I think that the past 2 years were an absolute necessary and something that we co-created to help bring change for the next few years. But it's also a necessary lesson that the collective needed to overcome in order to become friends with the unknown, both internally to master our fears. And we are still going through that. So I hope that, bringing so much love and compassion to all of you that have been experiencing, they have been hard years. For a reason. And but you guys are doing amazing. And I'm so happy at where we are right now. And I know that we're headed to something even better,
I think we are. I think it has been an initiation and a transformation. And it is about the unknown, letting go of what we thought was normal everyday life. And so we can experience something unknown and embrace the unknown. So Geraldine, I also wanted people to know what you do and how they can find you and how they can work with you collectively and one-on-one.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, if you want to get a hypnotherapy, I do something called holographic hypnotherapy. I can see everything that you see and feel what you're feeling, so it allows me to help you integrate from those fragments within all the dimensional planes. We navigate those. And so you can book a session at GeraldineOrozco.com. And with DNA reprogramming, again, we're working with the holographic DNA system, reintegrating fragments, healing, and changing the programs into something more compassionate and unconditional for the self. Again, at GeraldineOrozco.com. If you want to reach the support group, hybridmother.com. If you're a contactee, you can do so at hybridmother.com, and my YouTube channel at Geraldine Orozco. You can subscribe. Yeah, thank you.
Are you ever challenged, if you want to share throughout the day, something comes up and you say, well, haven't looked at that and stuff. Does that happen to you? Or
say it again.
Have you ever been, are you challenged sometimes during the day, someone cuts you off in traffic or not even that, just something comes up where it's like it hits an old place and then you have to look at that. Does that happen to you sometimes?
Of course, absolutely. It's ever constant all the time. Things are triggering and trying to get us out. So it's a constant bringing back and just embodying that compassion. And sometimes it gets harder than other times. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But it does seem like you've reached a peaceful place. You're always smiling and kind and compassionate. I see you.
Thank you. I thank you for that. Thank you. Yeah. I'm not perfect. So
but you're working. Yeah. But if stuff comes up, you don't react to your reaction. You look at it and say, oh, what was that about?
Yes. Right? I try. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right. So the idea is to not react. I heard someone say, but to respond. The reaction comes from the program. Responding comes from the present.
Exactly.
So
that's the free will. Exactly that. Yes.
Right. Yeah. And it's like Bashar says, it's not the circumstances that matter. It's your feeling or reaction to the circumstances that matter. That's what I sense is our true ultimate test. You know what I mean? The outside world is whatever it is, but our response to the outside world is really reality more than the world around us. So, and that's a choice. That's right.
Agreed.
Well, it's always great to talk to you, Geraldine, and I look forward to your presentation on Sunday, this coming Sunday. And also Geraldine will be one of my guests on Sacred Sunday with Scott Gatamas the following Sunday, the 30th. That's 10 a.m. Pacific. We'll do some promotion about that. So anything you want to leave us with before we...
I think that's all. Thank you so much for having me on here. It's a pleasure, and I can't wait for Sunday, and I look forward to connecting with all of you. Thank you.
Well, you are getting very popular because of your higher perspective. So congratulations on, of course, it's not you because you're the individual, but the collective that's recognizing you.
Yes. Agreed. Love that. Thank you.
This is Alan Steinfeld with Geraldine Orozco. We'll go do more programs and watch us on Sunday for the upcoming event. Thank you very much. And thank you everyone online for watching and the super chats. And we really appreciate that supports our work here. So we'll talk soon.